when I ask a question, I want that person to show me a deceptive behavior within the first 5 seconds after I ask that question. If they don't show me a deceptive behavior of the list that I'm going to show you in a minute, and within 5 seconds, they're not lying to me. They're not lying to me, okay? I need to see or hear one of those behaviors in the first 5 seconds. If I see the first behavior in the first 5 seconds, I don't have to see another behavior for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 seconds, all right? But I do have to see that first one in the first 5 seconds. Now,
Dr. Evans says her collapse is consistent with the effect of an air embolus caused by an injection of air into her circulation when the designated nurse was not in the room. But you were.
Right.
Have you got any explanations now, Lucy?
No.
From the evidence provided, Lucy, it shows that you were present when collapsed. Do you agree with that? You were working in nursery 1. The nurse was in there. She had gone out for a reason.
If that's what she says, I don't recall specifically where I was.
Is there a reason why you remembered the administering of the medication and not the collapses, Lucy?
No, I only remember the medication from looking through the notes and seeing that I obviously did sign the medications.
Is it because you remember the administration of the medication because that's when you took the opportunity to attack Lucy and administer air? No?
Okay, and I just read a bit of that was Susan Carnicero, who founded Q Verity, or was one of the founders of Q Verity, and so she's an expert on how to spot deception, and she worked for the CIA. She, so I haven't put everything, I've just, the relevant bits that apply here. So she makes it very clear that when she's looking for deceptive behaviours, it's important to just watch the behaviours that are directly in response to the question. So the behaviours in between times are not relevant. It's what she sees in direct response to the question that's asked. So I'm looking at Lucy, I'm looking at the questions that ask exactly how Lucy responds, not before the question's asked or while the question's, but as the question's being asked and as she responds, how does she behave? In the first 5 seconds of after being asked a question, this is what this Susan Carnicero says is the crucial time to look for deceptive behaviours. So if she doesn't see any deceptive behaviours in the first 5 seconds after answering the question, she says the person's telling the truth. Absolutely, that's it. The person's telling the truth if there's no deceptive behaviours in the first 5 seconds. And I don't see any deceptive behaviours. Now, we can't see Lucy's feet. We can only see the top half of her body. So I don't know if she's moving her feet. That can't be helped, I don't know. But judging from the rest of her composure, she answers straight answers. There doesn't appear to be any deceptive behaviours in those first 5 seconds, which suggests that she's telling the truth. And deceptive behaviours are things like, I don't know, it would be like fidgeting, touching your face or moving about or... shifty eyes are a sign, looking sideways, looking up, down or whatever, shifting your eyes to away or towards the person, and also hard swallowing, things like that as well. And then as in words, it would be, so you don't, instead of just answering the question, it would be elaborating, qualifying, going on, saying more things than you need to say, coughing, any of these sort of things. I mean, other than just answering the question. So if it's a yes or no question, all you need is yes or no.
Is it because you remember the administration of medication because that's when you took the opportunity to attack Lucy and administer air? No?
So if it's a yes or no question, all you need is yes or no.
Have you ever thought that there could be some other explanation for all of this, and that Lucy Letby is innocent?
Well, that was the journey we went on in the first year before we finally asked her to be removed from the neonatal unit. That was a year of looking for all those alternative explanations, and we excluded all those things until we got down to one point, which was Lucy Letby.
If it's a yes or no question, all you need is yes or no question, all you need is yes or no question, all you need is yes or no.
We want to recognize evasiveness. What does that look like when someone's trying to evade telling me the truth or evade telling me
Tell me about the night when you walked in on Lucy Letby standing over the cot of baby Kay.
That is a night that is etched on my memory and will be in my nightmares forever, to be honest. I was sitting...
We're also going to look at convey versus convince. What do I mean by convey versus convincing? And finally, we're going to look at some of those nonverbal cues.
If you convey something, that's what you would do if you're telling the truth, right? All you need to do is show what, you know, the truth. Whereas when it becomes suspicious, it's when you try and convince. So
Was this a significant missed opportunity, that when those lab results weren't really flagged at the time? Do you think that was a missed opportunity?
Yes. In an ideal world, you'd hope that the lab would flag it so it would be reviewed by somebody senior. That didn't happen.
It's been said.
So the implication was that was there a missed opportunity to get a killer? Well, the correct answer would have been no. And so the reason he's having to convince after his yes answer rather than just say yes is because he's trying to be convincing that yes, there was a missed opportunity. And then he goes on, you know, trying to sort of blame the lab or whatever he's trying to do is to... But ultimately, there was no opportunity missed because there was no murderer on the loose.
Convey versus convincing. And versus convincing. And finally, versus convincing.
At the time.
And finally...
Do you regret not having personally contacted police?
Looking back on it, knowing that babies were collapsing and dying during that year, it is regrettable we hadn't stopped it sooner. But as I say, the pattern of these deaths being unusual amongst the other collapses and deaths that were happening, amongst the 300 odd babies who were being cared for on the unit, it did take us time to realise something very worrying was happening. But perhaps earlier in 2016 it could have been stopped.
We want to recognize evasiveness. What does that look like when someone's trying to evade telling me the truth or evade telling me
Looking back on it, knowing that babies were collapsing and dying during that year, babies were collapsing and dying. It is regrettable we hadn't stopped it sooner. We hadn't stopped it sooner. But the pattern of these deaths being unusual amongst the other collapses and deaths that were happening.
And I've given examples of this before in my articles, but things like, I think I used something like, you know, so imagine that you're late for work and your boss says, oh, you know, makes a remark about you being late for work. Why are you late for work? Asks you directly why you work for work. And you answer, oh, the bus didn't turn up. But you know, it was raining this morning and I had to let the cat out, and that immediately you're making excuses and it sounds like you're lying because you started going on about it being rainy and the cat out when all you needed to say was the bus didn't turn up. End of. A truthful answer is the bus didn't turn up. You don't need all the rest. And once you start explaining with all the rest, it suggests that you're not telling the truth. Actually, the bus did turn up, but you were feeding the cow or something, you know what I mean? So, or at least you weren't at the bus stop, you know, you were feeding the cow or whatever you were really doing, you know. So it's that thing, that elaboration thing. All you need to do to convey the truth is say the bus didn't turn up. The bus did not turn up. That's it. Lucy's answers are very much along the line of the bus didn't turn up, full stop. That's how she's answering. The bus didn't turn up. No, yes, no, right. One word answers. No fidgeting, nothing. That suggests to any, and you don't need to be a CIA officer. We all know this inherently. This is what this CIA woman explains and what other experts would explain on deception. And we already know inherently as human beings, because we know how to study body language. But, you know, obviously everybody's got their default as lesson as well. And anxiety obviously is something that you've got to be able to just, you know, some people might fidget due to anxiety. It doesn't mean necessarily lying. But as that Susan Carnesaro said in her video, but the first 5 seconds are crucial. And if you see deceptive behavior in the first 5 seconds after answering, then she knows the person is lying, and that is because she will be looking at all their behavior. So outside of that, there's clusters of behavior she talks about.
And I'm going to rely on what we call timing and clusters. And this is really the big deal, the timing and clusters thing.
So after the first 5 seconds, she would then be looking for more deceptive behaviors that would happen going on from that. And if she sees more deceptive behaviors, that again is, it's a sign that someone's being deceptive. And then she would take the whole interview and look at how someone, you know, if someone's acting anxious and fiddly all the way through, regardless of whether they're answering a question or not, then that might just be because they're that type of person. That's the situation, or they're that type of person. But if the jerks, the signs that, I mean, it can be their feet they're moving, or we can't see it with Lucy, but, you know, the hair they're fiddling with, or nose, or, you know, they could be coughing, or all this sort of thing happens just when answering the question, then that suggests that it's about the question rather than it's because they're anxious. Because if it was because they're anxious, those behaviours would happen randomly, not just in response to the question. That's the thing. You know, the other thing she points out, she pointed out there were 6 things to look for in sort of areas to look at. I didn't show her saying them all, but the other thing she said was things like speculate versus analyze. So analyze is what you want to do. Speculate is what you want to do, not want to do. So speculate would be they might show a behavior and you're sort of speculating what it means, but it'll be irrelevant because it wasn't in direct response to the question. So if you analyze, all you need to analyze is what happens when you ask the question, and that's what the police should have been doing.
We want to be aware of aggression. Aggression is one of the major keys for people being deceptive. We're all going to
said aggression can be a sign, and that someone's being dishonest. Well, we haven't seen any aggression in Lucy. Well, I haven't seen any aggression in Lucy at all. You haven't seen her getting in any way. She just answers the questions very calmly and straight, and she doesn't even flinch, and she answers the question. She also answers some questions very, very quickly. Now, also, was explained in this video, is this your mind works faster than someone talking. So if someone answers a question before the end of the question, then that's because their mind's working quicker than the questioner. And, you know, it clearly, Lucy doesn't even think about some of the answers she's given that deeply. She's just straight giving that answer. No, that's it, you know, and she does it straight away with no hesitation. On some other questions, she takes a little bit longer, but no sign of any deceptive behaviours. Let's compare that again with Gibbs.
Point where, when an alarm went off, you were instantly worried that the same thing would be happening again?
Probably only by late 2016, by June certainly, when I went to the neonatal unit around that time for yet another collapse. I did feel, oh no, not another one.
That the same thing would be happening again?
Probably only by late. Probably only by late. Probably only by
I need
late.
to look closely at Brewery here too.
Have you ever thought that there could be some other explanation for all of this and that Lucy Letby is innocent?
Well, that was the journey we went on in the first year before we finally asked her to be removed from the neonatal unit. That was a year of looking for all those alternative explanations, and we excluded all those things until we got down to one point, which was Lucy Letby.
Well, that's the journey we went on, Swallow, in the first year before we... I mean, he's holding his hands like that, but you can see he's fiddling there a little bit, and he swallows at the beginning. So there's some just what would be called deceptive behaviour in the first 5 seconds there. Also note that he doesn't actually answer the question at all. He just, after he's done his fiddling, he goes on to convince. He doesn't answer the question. He's convincing, not conveying, which is a sign, again, dishonesty.
Have you ever thought that there could be some other explanation for all of this and that Lucy Letby is innocent?
Okay, we're looking for a yes or no answer here.
Well, that was the journey we went on in the first year before we finally asked her to be removed from the neonatal unit. That was a year of looking for all those alternative explanations, and we excluded all those things until we got down to one point, which was Lucy Letby.
So he doesn't deny that he's ever thought that there could be another explanation for this and that Lucy is innocent. There's no denial there, is there? And just to clarify that some people would probably get fooled by the bit at the end where he says, until we got down to one point, and that was Lucy Letby. But that is not answering the question. It's not, because the question was, have you ever thought there could be some other explanation to this, and that Lucy, have you ever thought that Lucy could be innocent? That was the question, which needs a yes or no answer. Yes, I've thought it, or no, I haven't. Until we got down to Lucy, does not answer that question. It doesn't make sense to answer that question. None of what he says makes sense. And if anyone's fooled by the end bit of Lucy's name being mentioned, that doesn't answer the question. Lucy is not the answer, or until we got down to Lucy, is not the answer to a yes or no question. It is convincing BS. Let's check out Gibbs again.
Sounds like it was horrific being there, to be blunt.
Well, it's horrific whenever babies die in the neonatal unit. It's devastating for the parents.
Although she makes a statement, sounds like it's horrific. It's not a question, but it's framed as a sort of question. And then he just avoids, he doesn't actually say, well, yeah, it was horrific. He says, well, it's horrific when any baby dies. Well, but we're talking about consultants here, yeah. So that's not realistic for a consultant. They deal with death all the time. So, you know, if it was horrific for them every time a baby died, they wouldn't be able to do their job. So again, he's avoiding the issue. He doesn't confirm that it was horrific specifically to do with the Lucy issue, and he doesn't confirm or deny that. He doesn't address the point. And to finish, I just want to mention the email that was sent by Brewery in 2015, October 2015, talking about his concerns about Lucy being there during deaths that had happened.
It was the first time I started to have some concerns about the unusual nature of the collapses and the deaths. I emailed the unit manager after this death in October and asked to discuss Lucy Letby and her association with the deaths.
Yeah, that email sent by Brewery was back in October 2015, and yeah, I've always thought that Gibbs was being a bit evasive over when because he says in one interview, and I haven't got the clip here, but it's on one of my articles, when he's saying, he alternates between saying he became really concerned late 2016 and June 2016, and 1 minute it's June and then it's late. Well, June 2016 and late 2016 aren't the same thing. So, but either way, even if it's June 2016, we're still a long way after October 2015 when Brewery sent that email to management. So none of this adds up, does it? There's a lot of dishonesty going on here, guesswork, dishonesty, gaslighting, and everything else, and the police should have been investigating all possible people that were around any of those babies, consultants, all the nurses, all the consultants, all the doctors, the locums, everything, even down to catering staff. Everybody should have been a suspect if you're going to investigate murders, but they only ever investigated one person, didn't they, because she was the target.